Welcome to the Liberty Cast, where we do our best to trigger the American communists with facts and common sense.
Hey, what's up, y'all? Welcome to the Liberty Cast. I'm your host, Big E, and today we're going to talk about a few things. First, obviously, President Trump walking away from the summit with Kim Jong-un. The press is having a field day with that, but I'm going to give you a little different perspective. We're also going to talk about Congress and their timing of holding the hearings with Michael Cohen while President Trump is halfway around the world. And then we'll talk about some gun control issues and Senator Feinstein and her annual assault weapons ban. So let's get to it.
Ding, ding.
As I'm sure you all are well aware, President Trump this week walked away from the summit that he was engaged in with Kim Jong-un of North Korea. President Trump knows what he's doing. Let's not forget, let's just take a step back. President Reagan walked away from Gorbachev in Reykjavik back in 1986. A year later, they signed the INF, the Intermediate Range Nuclear Forces Treaty. A lot of what is being said about President Trump now was said about Reagan back then. He's an idiot. He's boorish. He's out of his depth. He's not qualified to be president. Yada, yada, yada. We're hearing the same things, plus some new ones. I'll give you that, plus some new ones. One of the biggest ones is he's a Russian agent, and that's just stupid. But like Trump said, you have to be prepared to walk away from these negotiations. Back in '86, Gorbachev wanted the U.S. to scrap SDI, also known as Star Wars, the Strategic Defense Initiative. That was a non-starter for Reagan. It was a non-starter, so he bounced. Peace. Now the short, fat kid in North Korea, his demand is that he wants all sanctions lifted before he will engage in any sort of denuclearization process. Trump said that's a non-starter and he bounced. Peace. It's not a loss. It's not... Kim Jong-un did not get the better of President Trump in this go-round. And that's one of the things that irritates me about people these days, not just the press, but people in general. We are an instant gratification culture, and that attitude pervades every aspect of our lives. No one seems to want to take the long view. No one wants to be patient. And people don't want to look at things in a historical context. People are so quick to declare the new shiny thing, the best thing ever. I get so tired of hearing people talking about LeBron James is the best basketball player ever. Come on. Just stop. Just stop. It's not true. He's great, but he's not the best ever. And this negotiation in Vietnam, it was a setback, but it's not a loss. So all the leftists bemoaning this turn of events, saying that Trump lost in the negotiations, they need to just settle down, take a beat, and think it through. Because North Korea is having some serious economic problems as a result of the sanctions imposed against them. And much of their economy is based on China, who is also suffering a major economic downturn as a result of the tariffs imposed by President Trump. So all the leftists who think that we are on the brink of nuclear war with North Korea need to just settle down. Settle down and just watch, because when the negotiations resume, when the next summit takes place, Chairman Kim is going to have no choice but to capitulate. And an agreement will be signed, and it's going to happen before the 2020 elections. And if part of this agreement is something like an end to the Korean War or a massive cut in the nuclear arsenal of North Korea, 2020 is a lock for President Trump and the Republicans. But there's really not a whole lot more to say about that. I mean, negotiations broke down. Well, negotiations just ended when Trump walked away. But it's not a bad thing. Just be patient. But that wasn't the only thing that happened while President Trump was in Vietnam. The leftists in Congress thought that that would be the absolute perfect time to have Michael Cohen testify in front of the House Oversight Committee about the things that he, meaning Michael Cohen, did at Donald Trump's direction, specifically regarding colluding with Russia to rig the election. Just ridiculous. But he testified this week. And now keep in mind, this is the same guy who's going to jail for tax evasion and lying to Congress. Come on. I mean, you can't make this stuff up. It's ridiculous. Now, I haven't touched on this much. I haven't touched on Spygate, Russian collusion, the Mueller probe, or any of that nonsense. I haven't touched on it because there are a lot more qualified people doing a remarkable job exposing all the lies and all the other improprieties being carried out by the left with regard to this Russia collusion hoax. But this was a big story, so I feel like I need to at least touch on it. This guy has actually admitted that he lied, and he also called himself a fool in front of Congress.
Mr. Cohen, you called Donald Trump a cheat in your opening testimony. What would you call yourself?
A fool.
You calling... Okay, well, no comment on that.
So how much press do we really need to give this guy? But we're going to give him some now, so let's review, shall we? The left is desperately trying to impeach President Trump. Never mind the fact that there's no evidence whatsoever that he committed any crime that would subject him to impeachment.
That's not how it works. That's not how any of this works.
No, that's not how any of this works. But they're working backwards. They want to impeach Trump so bad that they're digging, looking for anything, any nugget of any hint of wrongdoing. But there's no probable cause. And we could spend a whole show, a whole month of shows digging into this. But like I said earlier, there are others that have been on this from the beginning. And if you want some comprehensive analysis of the whole episode, I suggest checking out Dan Bongino's work. He debunks a lot of the talking points and more often than not uses the left wing's own sources to do it. It's absolutely brilliant. But we're just going to focus on Cohen right now. A small piece because he was in front of Congress and there's more than enough for us to tackle right there. But Michael Cohen is a known, admitted liar. He's actually been convicted of lying to Congress. But there's a few highlights from his testimony that I wanted to get to. A couple of times he actually contradicted himself in his testimony. So why should we take anything he says now seriously? Well, you can't. You really can't unless there's corroboration. Case in point, Michael Cohen has denied over and over again that he's ever been to Prague. Okay, he's a known liar, so why should we believe that? Why is that significant? Well, it's significant because it's one of the linchpins in this whole Russian collusion narrative. He supposedly went to Prague and met with Russian agents to further the goal of rigging the election by limiting coverage regarding Trump's alleged ties to Russia and enlisting the help of some Russian hackers to do it. He denies it. His Clintonista lawyer, Lanny Davis, denies it. But his passport shows no stamp in Prague. There was a report of that his cell phone pinged the tower in Prague and something else. none of which has been corroborated. So when you take that into account, the chances are pretty good that he's never been to Prague. And now that he's a convicted liar, lying to Congress, they asked him again that direct question, and he said no. So if he's never been to Prague, the Russian collusion narrative falls apart right there.
Have you ever been to Prague?
I've never been to Prague.
Never have.
I've never been to the Czech Republic.
Yield my balance my time.
That was Representative Norman from South Carolina asking Michael Cohen if he'd ever been to Prague, and he said no. Now, obviously, I've said previously that we can't take a lot of any of what Michael Cohen says seriously. There is some evidence to support his claim that he's never been to Prague or the Czech Republic. So on this point, I'm just going to go ahead and say that the Russian collusion narrative is debunked. Now, before we get any further down the road, I just want to make it clear, I did not watch all 7 or 8 hours of this testimony. I have a full-time job, and frankly, sitting there watching Michael Cohen and his silly face just didn't appeal to me. The fact that he's a lawyer kind of surprises me, because he looks like, well, you know what, I'm just going to leave that alone. He just does not come off as the sharpest tool in the shed, and we'll leave it at that. So I didn't watch it all, but I did see some highlights, and I did read the entirety of his opening statement transcript. But there are websites out there where you can look. There's actually a website that I'll put up on the libertycast.net where you can actually search keywords, and it will take you right to a point in the testimony where you can listen to it. So that's actually C-SPAN's website, and it is a pretty sweet setup. So I'll link to it up on the libertycast.net. But one of the points that did get my attention was the phone call he mentioned between President Trump and Roger Stone. This is the phone call where Stone supposedly informed him that there was about to be a massive dump of emails that could damage Hillary Clinton's campaign.
Mr. Stone told Mr. Trump that he had just gotten off the phone with Julian Assange, and that Mr. Assange told Mr. Stone that within a couple of days, there would be a massive dump of emails that would damage Hillary Clinton's campaign. Mr. Trump responded by stating to the effect, "Wouldn't that be great?"
Doesn't he sound like Eeyore? I mean, that voice is annoying as hell. But anyway, there's a couple of things about this that just don't quite add up. Not the least of which is the fact that he was asked directly, how can we corroborate this information? And he said, you can't. Not only that, but Michael Cohen is known to have recorded interactions with all of his clients. And yet, there's not a recording of this. It just doesn't seem to make sense. It's out of character for him based on what we know so far. But then there's the fact that if Donald Trump was actually colluding or conspiring, because colluding is such a stupid word, if he was conspiring with the Russians to fix the election, his reaction to that news doesn't seem appropriate to the circumstance. Because if he was conspiring, wouldn't he already know that the emails were going to get dumped because WikiLeaks supposedly got them from the Russians, right? So he would already know this. So I think Cohen contradicted himself in his testimony right there. But here's another one where he contradicts himself. He talks about how Trump supposedly lied about the Trump-Moscow negotiations because he never expected to win. And that's just stupid. Because obviously Michael Cohen never read The Art of the Deal. And Trump has always been, that book came out in the early 80s. Trump has always been an expect the best, but prepare for the worst type of guy. But I'm going to play two cuts for you back to back. These things happened within minutes of each other, I believe, during his testimony. And you're going to get to see exactly what we're dealing with in the person of Michael Cohen.
Mr. Trump knew of and directed the Trump-Moscow negotiations throughout the campaign and lied about it. He lied about it because he never expected to win. Mr. Trump's desire to win would have him work with anyone.
So which is it, man? Is Donald Trump a guy who was going through the motions, never expecting to win, and then being surprised when he did? Or is he a guy that would do anything it took to win? You can't have it both ways. Both things can't be true. Okay, one last quick thing I want to touch on before we move on, because I do want to get to some other things. But one of the things that Michael Cohen said, and I'm not going to play the cut because his voice is annoying, but one of the things that he said was that Donald Trump never wanted to lead the country, never expected to win the primary or the general election, and only ran in order to enhance his brand. Okay, none of that makes any sense because we've already established he was willing to do anything to win. He wanted to win. And if he was going to build his brand, why would he do it by running as a Republican when Republicans, conservatives are vilified all over the liberal media? That doesn't seem to be a wise business strategy. And if he didn't want to win or lead the country, why did he get excited at the prospect of having those emails dropped that would damage Hillary Clinton's campaign? It doesn't make any sense. Michael Cohen contradicted himself many times during that 7-hour testimony, and I just touched on a few real quick. I didn't want to spend as much time on this as I did. But again, even though there's no reason to take this guy seriously, he did say something else that I wanted to touch on, aside from the Russia collusion thing, and that is that he asserted that Trump is a racist. How original. But we're going to take a break, and when we get back, we're gonna break that down real quick too. Okay, this has been going on since Trump famously came down that escalator and announced his candidacy for President of the United States. Something that I've seen on my social media feeds more and more lately, and the fact that Michael Cohen perpetuated this myth in his testimony brought that even more to the forefront. But Donald Trump is not a racist. No matter how many times people say it, no matter how many times they want it to be true, he's not. And if he is, he's the worst racist ever. We have record low unemployment for minorities, criminal justice reform signed into law. In his own organization, black men and women in positions of power and authority throughout all of his businesses. So if he's a racist, how does that work exactly? Because if you think black people, minorities in general, are inferior, why would you put them in positions where they're responsible for making or losing you money? Doesn't make any sense. And what about all of the black people, the civil rights activists that loved Trump back in the day? Back when he was just a businessman, Al Sharpton, Muhammad Ali, Omarosa. Would any of those people really have stuck by him all that time if he were a racist? Come on. Just think about that. And think about Al Sharpton and Omarosa. As much as those two idiots like to hear themselves talk, do you really think if they thought he was a racist, they wouldn't have said anything? And Omarosa, he brought her along ever since The Apprentice. She got a position in the White House So if Donald Trump is a racist, he's doing it completely wrong. Now, what sparked this for me, aside from the Cohen testimony, which, like we already established, we can't take him seriously, so I just dismissed it. But other people did. And I saw a post on my feed where everyone was saying that Mark Meadows asking Lynn Patton to be a guest at Cohen's hearing and having her stand up was racist. Only people who view everything through the prism of race would say something like that. And when you pull the racist card, the only thing someone can do is walk away and refuse to engage, refuse to stoop to that level, or respond. But either way, you can't win. And if you can't win, you might as well stand up and fight. People were saying that it was dumb for Meadows to invite her and have her stand up. Why? She knows Trump. She had a prominent position in the Trump organization, and now she's in a leadership position in the administration. She's friends with the whole family and was friends with Michael Cohen until he turned on Donald Trump. So Michael Cohen opened that door. I mean, the Democrats kicked that door off its hinges back in 2016. So all that's left is to pull out all the stops and say, no, not today. And on those same lines, how did it become racist to say that some of my best friends are, and then fill in the blank? Yes, that is a serious question. And here's why. I grew up in a somewhat diverse neighborhood, but it was primarily an Italian-American town. The entire area, region, really. But my circle growing up was diverse. I had black friends, Italian friends, Irish friends. I had friends that were Greek, Hispanic, you name it. I could easily have said some of my best friends are Italian. My Italian friends could have just as easily said that some of their best friends were black. So if it's true, how is that racist? If you see things through the prism of race, which I find absolutely repulsive and a terrible way to live, I mean, you can't possibly be a happy person living that way. It's got to be exhausting. Because everything is going to have some sort of racial component to it. And if everything has a racial component to it, you're going to be forced to respond or bottle up that anger inside. And like I said, you can't possibly be a happy person living that way. But I have another question. Barack Obama was supposed to be this change agent, this post-racial president. So why are we even talking about this? Why did things get so much worse under his leadership? And it's kind of hard to believe he's a racist since his mother was white and he presumably had an entire or has an entire maternal side of his family that's white. But why haven't we heard from them? Are there any left? Now, that's a sincere question because that just crossed my mind right now. Because we haven't heard from, I know his mother has passed on and his grandparents probably have as well, but there's got to be some left, right? I don't know. I'm just asking. I have no idea. And frankly, never really cared until just now. But the point is, the left is obsessed with race. You hear the term identity politics, which is all-encompassing, race, gender, to the extent such a thing still exists, class, etc. But race is their bread and butter. They've been obsessed with it since the civil rights era. LBJ is famously quoted for saying, I'll have those voting Democrat for 200 years. While the quote-unquote war on poverty, also known as the welfare state, was jumping off. There's some debate as to whether or not he actually uttered those words, but there's no debate that he was a notorious racist, obsessed with amassing power. He was a bully. He bribed people. He stole elections. I only bring all that up just to illustrate his need to amass power. And the left has been following that lead ever since. It's the left that are the racists. KKK, abortion, Planned Parenthood and Margaret Sanger. They wanted to destroy the black population. More black babies are aborted than born in New York. I know it sounds like I'm getting off track, but the point that I'm trying to drive home is this. It's the left that are the racists. So when they pull the race card, they're trying to project their sins onto you. So if someone accuses you of being a racist, you know that they're just trying to shut down a debate. They don't want to debate you on the merits because they know they can't win. And they're accusing you of the very thing of which they're guilty. Okay, folks, I have rambled on long enough about Michael Cohen and this nonsense. So I wanted to get you out of here on something that I wanted to spend more time on and probably will next week. But last week, the House passed H.R. 8 and H.R. 1112. I talked to you about them before, but H.R. 8 is what I want to focus on today. And H.R. 8 is known as the Bipartisan Background Checks Act of 2019. This bill passed pretty much along party lines, but there were 8 Republicans that voted with the Democrats on it. And even though one of them is from Texas, it really shouldn't surprise anyone because this group of 8 has a record for being anti-constitutional when it comes to guns. They keep using the term loophole to describe gaps in the enforcement of current laws. But there's no gun show loophole. You can't go to a gun show and purchase a gun without a background check. If you do, it's a felony. That's not a loophole. Go to a gun shop and ask to purchase a gun without filling out a 4473. Go ahead. I dare you. You may find yourself under arrest or at the very least the subject of an investigation. One of the shops that I frequent is owned and the guys who are behind the counter are all current or former law enforcement. I guarantee if somebody rolls up into that shop asking that question, they're coming out in cuffs. So not only is there no gun show loophole, not only can you not buy a gun without a background check, you can't buy a gun from an online retailer and get it shipped directly to your house. You have to have that gun shipped to an FFL where they conduct a background check before they hand you the gun. Now, one of the 8, Brian Mast, he's an Army veteran, lost both of his legs while serving in Afghanistan. I thank him for his service and his sacrifice. But he's dead wrong on this issue. He said after Parkland, "I cannot support the primary weapon I used to defend our people being used to kill children I swore to defend." Civilians can't get that weapon. It's already banned. And converting an AR-15 to a fully automatic or select fire weapon is illegal. That's not a loophole. I don't really know how many more times and different ways I can say this. The AR-15 is not an assault rifle. Such a thing does not exist. Assault is an action, not an object. Now, we're pretty much out of time, so I didn't get a chance to talk about Dianne Feinstein's assault weapons ban, but that will be top of the list next week. So like I said, folks, we are out of time. So if you like the show, please subscribe and leave a review. You can find us on iTunes, iHeartRadio, Spotify, Spreaker, SoundCloud, and pretty much most other podcast platforms. And also feel free to hit me up on social media. I'm on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at The Liberty Cast on all 3 platforms. And I look forward to hearing from you and engaging in some spirited discussions. So until next time, keep your head on a swivel and stay safe, everybody.